Today, at the modern new Turfway Park in Florence, Kentucky, they host the 10th edition of this race, now known as the Jim Beam, with a guaranteed purse of $500,000 and a rich tradition of past champions like Marfa, the gray colt who won the second Beam by 8 lengths and now tops the current leading sire list in thoroughbred racing. In 1986, Rod Brush was this event's first winner and would go on to become a racing millionaire. He was followed 3 years later by Western Playboy, and again last year by Summer Squall, who went on to become a classic winner in the second jewel of racing's Triple Crown, the Preakness. These and others have given this Jim Beam the perfect blend of stars and tradition to challenge our 10th anniversary field for 1991. ESPN presents Budweiser Racing Across America. Brought to you by Budweiser. Nothing beats the excitement of horse racing, and nothing beats a Bud. By Racing Times, there's more to racing than just the form. And by DeBartolo Racing, leading the way to the 21st century. The Jim Beam Stakes from Turfway Park in northern Kentucky is coming up next, live on ESPN. Live from Turfway Park, the many different and separate roads to the Triple Crown start coming together here this afternoon in northern Kentucky for the $500,000 Jim Beam Stakes. And hello again, everyone. I'm Chris Lincoln as we welcome you here on ESPN to Jim Beam Day at Turfway. And for these 3-year-old colts with Derby dreams, they've arrived from all over the nation, from California, Florida, Maryland, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Kentucky, here to measure themselves for the first time, really, against each other, with that ultimate goal, the Kentucky Derby, now just 5 weeks away. But for the people here at Turfway Park, there is no bigger day, no bigger week than Jim Beam Week and Turfway Festival Week. All kinds of special events and some very special people here, including the former President of the United States, Gerald Ford, here this afternoon. But certainly, the highlight is the 10th race this afternoon, the Jim Beam. Let's take a look at the conditions of racing here. The Jim Beam, a grade 2. The purse is a $500,000 guaranteed. That is the richest guaranteed purse in the state of Kentucky. The 3-year-olds go 1 1/8. They carry 121 pounds. Well, the weather after forecasts of rain, sleet, and snow has turned out beautiful, a bit chilly. Temperatures in the 40s, but at least today, no precipitation. And for the first time since 1987, we're going to have a fast track. And taking a look at the conditions of this racetrack, we can tell you it is really fast. We have had 2 track records set today, one at 5 furlongs, one at 1 1/16. So believe me when I say the strip today is fast at Turfway Park. Well, now to meet the field that will contest for that $500,000 in the Jim Beam Stakes, let's go over to the paddock area and to Dave Johnson and Dan Issel. Here they are.
And Dan, for the first time this year on the road to the Triple Crown, East meets West. And what do the two camps say?
Well, Fly So Free has won all the prep races in Florida, but the Westerners haven't been impressed. They think he hasn't been beating very many good horses. He's been running in slow times. On the West Coast, the 3-year-olds have taken turns beating one another by necks and noses. And the Easterners' response, they can't all be great horses.
Well, let's see who's come from the East and the West and who's shown up in the local colony in the Beam. We start with River, Fit, and Wilder Than Ever, 2 local stars. Shane Sellers and Joe Deegan ride, both 30-1. From Florida is Hansel, Jerry Bailey, the pilot, 4-1. A local star, Bobby M. with Inocencio Marte at 30. Greg Hutton rides the long shot He Is Risen, who has raced in Maryland at Laurel and Pimlico. Lost Mountain, the 6-horse, comes from Oaklawn Park in Arkansas, and Patty Cooksey rides. Here's the morning line favorite, number 7, Richmond. In from Florida via New Orleans, where we saw him win the Louisiana Derby, and Pat Day gets the assignment. Subordinated Dead also wintered in Florida, and Mike Smith is the jockey, 5-1. Discover with Aaron Grider. This is a horse, Midwest star, who scored a handy victory in the Battaglia, which is the big major prep here at Turfway for the big race today. From Gulfstream, Sir Otto with Jamie Bruin at 15-1, and a true California 3-year-old star, Apollo, 7-2 second choice, and Chris McCarron rides. And they talk about the horse and the race here, but a lot of talk about one jockey.
Pat Day has an unbelievable record here. He's accepted 4 mounts. He's won with all 4 of them, including Summer Squall, last year's winner.
And coming into this race, Pat Day was not only the regular rider of Richmond, but also the regular rider of Hansel.
Yeah, but Richmond has been pointed to this race all along, and Pat Day committed early. Hansel decided to come just a few days ago.
And Jerry Bailey picked up that mount. He's also the regular rider of Scan, but it never hurts to have more than one good horse on the way to the Triple Crown. You know, Dan, you're in an interesting position, having been an All-American, played for Kentucky. Put this race in perspective for a basketball fan.
Well, the thoroughbreds haven't reached the Final Four yet, but the tournament has started, and they're going to start eliminating one another. But right now, everybody's still hoping to get in that starting gate the first Saturday in May.
But let's take a look at the route for today's 9-furlong contest, 1 1/8 miles the distance. Turfway is a standard 1-mile oval, the starting gate positioned directly in front of the grandstand, and then once around the big oval. Used to be known as Latonia Park. Long backstretch run. The turns are not too tight, and it's 970 feet from the top of the stretch to the finish line. Dan, with that circumference and the way the post positions were drawn, does it hurt anybody?
Well, neither Gary Jones nor Chris McCarron seem too concerned with their outside post position, but Apollo's going to have to use some of his speed to get a good spot going into that first turn.
Chris?
Well, a big crowd has turned out on Jim Beam Day today here at Turfway. Some 18,000 expected on track. More than 46,000 across the state of Kentucky watching and enjoying the Jim Beam here on ESPN. Some of the young fans here at Turfway Park, some down from Ohio, just across the river here, of course, this Northern Kentucky track. And back at Turfway, and of course, Turfway Park is a member of the Thoroughbred Racing Associations. With me now is the president and co-owner of the track, Jerry Carroll, to talk about how important corporate sponsorship is in all of racing. Jerry has played a big part here today with the Jim Beam.
I think it's the future, Chris. I think that's what we're looking for. We got the Jim Beam coming in here in 10 years. We built this thing to a major race. We're excited about it. The excitement is showing here at the racetrack. And I think we've got something that not only the corporate sponsor can become, enamored with what's happening, but also the racetrack and the fans.
It's had a carryover for all of your racing. Again, increasing purses here.
Increasing purses to the point where we're one of the few tracks in the country that are increasing purses at this time. But we're looking forward to the fans that can take a look at the Jim Beam. They now identify with it. They know the horses that are coming in here, and we're excited about the whole event.
Well, the man who is Jim Beam, if you were, the president, CEO of Jim Beam Brands, Mr. Barry Barish. And Barry, it really is a very natural blend for you.
Chris, it's a perfect blend. There's 2 great American basics, Kentucky Thoroughbred Racing and Jim Beam Bourbon. It's our 10th year. We're very proud of sponsoring this event. It's become a local event that really has a national audience, and it's really good for racing. It's very good for the company. We're very happy to be here.
You've been a pretty good handicapper the last couple of days. Any favorite in the Beam?
Oh, no, I never will tell before.
Barry, thank you very much for Jim Beam's sponsorship and your support of Thoroughbred Racing.
Chris, thank you, and we know we'll be back next year for a better one.
Very good. Mr. Barry Barish, the president and CEO of Jim Beam Brands. Jerry Carroll again with Turfway Park here. You know, 2 of our favorites here in the Jim Beam race, Apollo and Hansel, are those of mythical names, I guess you might say. But they're looking today for some very real answers to some very important questions. Dan Issel went looking to try to help us with some of the answers earlier.
Trainer Frank Brothers knows that overcoming obstacles and staying on schedule are critical elements of the Triple Crown chase. His talented colt Hansel, a top 2-year-old last year, has been just a step behind the best sophomores in Florida all spring, and most recently finished 3rd in the Florida Derby. Now, Brothers hopes that the Jim Beam will be just the right tonic to put Hansel back on schedule.
I think timing-wise, it was a good race for him. It was either here or the Bluegrass, and we really kind of wanted to get away from Fly So Free. I was debated whether to run him back in 2 weeks or not, but he came out of his race well, and we got lucky to get a plane up here, and all those things are pretty important, you know, when you go to shipping around. And, you know, hopefully we'll get a better race out of him this trip.
For California-based Apollo, everything has proceeded according to plan. He passed the test for class in the San Rafael in a blanket finish with Dinar and Best Pal. But trainer Gary Jones wonders if his colt's best quality might also be a problem in the beam.
He's a horse that gives 120%. He's very genuine. And that's why I'm concerned about the extra eighth of a mile. Because I know he's going to go as hard as he can go for as far as he can go. So, you know, when you take a sprinter and you go a distance of ground for the first time, they're used to going 44 and change in California. And now all of a sudden they go 47, and it's like they died and went to heaven. And a lot of times you'll see a false courage come out of it, and the very first time a sprinter will run a distance of ground will be his very best one.
Among those hoping Apollo's best is yet to come are the colt's owners, Harold and Diane Keith and Leon Rasmussen. They have not been difficult to spot following Apollo around here at Turfway Park. But according to Gary Jones, popularity with the fans is nothing new to Apollo.
He's got a following there in California because they get their money's worth. When you know, he lays the body down. He's 8-1 the other day, and man, everybody was sick. He got beat because everybody bet on him, you know. Here's a horse undefeated, he's 8-1. It tells you how tough it is in California.
You might have noticed Apollo's bandage blowing in the breeze. That's something that will give a trainer nightmares, but Apollo returned to the barn without incident. The plans are set for Apollo. If he's able to get the distance today, 1 1/8 miles, he'll go straight to Churchill Downs and await the Derby. If not, he'll return to Southern California and those adoring fans. Chris?
All right, Dan, and as you see, an overview of the paddock as they await the starters for the Jim Beam Stakes of 1991. Beam Day, you could also say this is Pat's Day, as in jockey Pat Day. He has been here 4 times and won the Jim Beam all 4 times. Dave Johnson talked with him earlier.
At the threshold, JT's Pet, Western Playboy, Summer Squall last year, 4 mounts, 4 victories in the Beam. Can you keep it going this year with Richmond?
Well, Dave, I'm very optimistic that we can. This colt, I certainly think, has got a tremendous chance here today.
You've ridden him in his last 4 starts. He's won 3 of them. In the Louisiana Derby, we saw something special in this colt.
Well, I was very impressed with his race in the Louisiana Derby. I know the quality of the horses behind him certainly wasn't the quality that he's meeting here today, but he showed me something that day. You know, he eyeballed that horse all the way to the head of the stretch, let another horse, a fresh horse actually, get past him a little bit, and then when I called on him, he responded, and he had some finish and galloped out real strong, and consequently, he's just, it leads me to be very optimistic here today.
Pat, it's a big field. There's a lot of horses that have some speed. Do you have to be on the front end to win this race?
I really don't think so, Dave. He was, I think he'd have settled back off of that horse the other day in the Louisiana Derby, the horse that we wound up going head-and-head with, except he was on the inside, and he's a competitive colt. I think if I could have got him behind him, he'd have settled nicely and wouldn't have, you know, wouldn't have been any problem. I really don't think that he has to be on the lead. He has a good turn of foot, you know, some early speed, and certainly think he'll contend the pace, but he don't have to make the pace.
Our congratulations, by the way, to Pat Day, who has also been nominated for Racing's Hall of Fame. Possible inductions in August when the votes come in. Well, you've heard from trainers and jockeys already in the show about the Jim Beam. We haven't heard much from owners. That seems to be the way it is a lot in racing. You don't hear a lot from these people who take all the risks, put up all the money. Oh, with that in mind, Three Chimneys Farm is introducing a new series profiling top owners in thoroughbred racing. And let's now meet an owner who had an impact on this Jim Beam, the 1989 Jim Beam and Western Playboy. Ray Roncari, the Connecticut industrialist, has been successful because he keeps his life in balance. God, family, his businesses, and his racehorses. The Roncari family has been involved in racing now for 3 decades.
We've had a piece of some very nice horses, and have now. Blue Buckaroo that we bought from one of the owners of Harvey, and with Harvey, talking about the Jim Beam and the other races, Western Playboy. We now still have an interest in Summer Squall, and we're going to continue to take these interests, besides raising our own horses.
The Roncaris do that on their Connecticut Scriptar farm, managed by his daughter Leslie. Ray Roncari is always looking to improve things, and that includes thoroughbred racing.
The whole industry's got to get a package together to sell ownership, because without the owners, you're not going to have horses. Without the horses, you don't have races. This industry is a big industry, but it can be a lot bigger, and there are many people that really would thrill to the excitement of owning a horse if they only had somebody approach them and say, how about it? Do you want to be in this business?
And why should someone consider being a thoroughbred owner?
Well, when you get through with all of the problems of a regular business, you're talking about horses and racing, which is something brand new every day. One of the reasons I left the Wall Street Journal reading and read the Racing Forum, there's a winner in every race. And it just takes the edge off of just about all the other things we're doing. It's a great thrill to be an owner of a racehorse.
This Thoroughbred Owner Profile is presented by Three Chimneys, who invite you to share the dream. The horses in the paddock now for the Jim Beam Stakes. And when we come back, we'll have more of Dan Issel in the paddock. More on the starters for today's Jim Beam. $500,000 at stake. He's making some selections, by the way. I'm sure he's taking a close look at them. And with that in mind, we want to tell you about our road to the Triple Crown on ESPN. Continues 1 week from today as we head to New York, to the Big A Aqueduct Racetrack for our coverage of the Gotham Stakes. The 1 Mile Gotham live on ESPN. 4 o'clock Eastern. 1 week from today, we'll get a good look now at the Eastern horses headed towards Kentucky. Let's update you on what the Kentuckians and Ohioans and everyone from this area thinks of this Jim Beam field. Here's our first look at the odds of the public. River Fit, big prices, wilder than ever, also a giant price. Hansel at 9-2 getting strong support. Bobby M, he has risen. Lost Mountain, all big prices. There's Richmond at 8-5, the favorite here, of course, mostly because of Pat Day, I'm sure, and also Richmond, a fine colt. Subordinated Debt, 5-1. Discover at 4-1. Sir Otto at 70-1. And the second choice, Apollo, is 7-2. And it is Apollo that's really helped make this race, the invader from California. He has a rider, Chris McCarron. Chris being reunited with Apollo after Kent DeSormo was hurt and had to take off of him. And really, certainly, Chris has a very interesting angle on this race because he rode against Apollo when he beat him with Dinar in the San Rafael, and now on Apollo today. With that in mind, we talked to Chris McCarron earlier, first about that San Rafael race.
Well, it was a very exciting horse race as far as the finish goes. They were running all the way, and they hit the wire 3 abreast with Best Pal down on the inside, Apollo in the middle, and Dinar on the outside. All 3 colts showed a great deal of gameness, and of course I was happy that Dinar was able to throw his head down right at the wire. But Apollo showed a great deal of gameness that day. He relaxed well in the lead for DeSormo, which I expected him to. I've been on him a few times in the morning, and I rode him once in the San Miguel. And even though he's a very brilliant colt, very fast, he relaxes well, and he cooperates with the rider a great deal. So that's going to help me today when he has to be able to carry that speed 1 1/8. His cooperation is going to make a big difference.
Chris McCarron on Apollo, the second choice now. Well, this Wednesday in New York City, a special announcement is going to be made on new information available that's never been made before for the racing fans. We're talking about the official announcement of Racing Times. Robert Maxwell, the owner, Stephen Chris, the editor-in-chief, will be on hand for that press conference. We're not going to wait until Wednesday, though, to get some of the Racing Times insight. We're going to join Dave Johnson up on the roof now with their Midwest editor edition. That's Ray Pollock. Dave?
And Ray, as the Midwest editor, are you going to pick one of the locals or are you going to pick one of the invaders?
Well, Dave, I moved here to Kentucky 3 years ago from California, so I have a lot of respect for California horses, especially California speed horses. Apollo showed speed in all of his races, and his last start, the San Rafael, he added a new dimension when he was game and tough down the stretch.
And let's take a look at the video down the backstretch. With Apollo on the lead, he showed something else.
Right, he had an easy lead in this race, but coming to the far turn, Best Pal comes up on the inside and Denard on the outside, and it looked at this point like they were going to run right past him.
As a matter of fact, in most races, that happens when the front runner's collared.
Right, but he hung tough the length of the stretch and put Best Pal away in the final yards, but got beat in the last jump by Denard.
Now, what do you see as the keys to victory for Apollo this afternoon, Ray?
Well, he's going to have to get a good position from his outside post into the turn. McCarron is going to have to get the colt to relax and set some moderate fractions down the backside. And at that point, he's going to have to respond to a challenge much like what we saw in the San Rafael.
Okay, Ray Pollock of the Racing Times. He picks Apollo, who is 7-2 on the tote board, Chris.
And right now, the second choice behind Richmond, Dave. Dan Issel has a look at those Jim Beamers now in the paddock.
Chris, we've talked about some of the favorites, but another horse that has a big shot, number 9, Discover, owned by one of the most popular names in thoroughbred racing, Claiborne Farm. Even though Discover was only off the board once in 8 starts last year, his running style at times was not very consistent. And so trainer Steve Penrod added the blinkers that you see. Since then, he's been very professional. His only start this year, 2 weeks ago, right here at Turfway Park, he was a galloping 7-length winner in the Battaglia Memorial Stakes. Discover will take a lot of beating today. Back to you, Chris.
Well, they've called him to the post here for the $500,000 Jim Beam Stakes. It's 10th edition. It's $300,000 to the winner. And this mile and an eighth pass again on a fast racetrack. Let's introduce you to the full field. The number 1 horse. This is River Fit, a local horse, 3rd in the President's, 5th in the Battaglia in the 2 Beam Preps. He's won a pair of allowance races here. The rider, Shane Sellers. He's based here in the Midwest. First Jim Beam mount. The 2 horse, the first of our Keeneland sale purchase horses, $42,000. You see the Keeneland K and Gavel there is Wilder Than Ever. Second in both the President's and the Battaglia Preps, has not won in 4 starts this year. The rider all the way from Ireland is Joe Deegan, a former leading apprentice rider in Ireland in 1981, now a regular here at Turfway. The 3 horse, Hansel, $150,000 Keeneland sale purchase, the first son of Woodman Racing. Up from Florida after a 3rd in the Florida Derby, one of last year's top 2-year-olds, winning a pair of Grade 2 Futurities, trained by Frankie Brothers, ridden today by Jerry Bailey, one of racing's best. He's won titles in New York, Florida, Illinois, was 3rd last year on Yonder in the Jim Beam. The 4 horse is Bobby M. Won the President's Stake by 7 lengths here, has placed in all 4 of his starts this year. The rider, an Asensio Marte. He has always been in the money on this colt in 4 starts. Marte, the rider on Bobby M. The 5 horse, $7,200 Keeneland sale bargain, has made more than $75,000 now. 2nd in the Tessio Stakes at Maryland, 3rd in the private terms there, unraced at 2. He was born on Easter Sunday, 1989. If you're a hunch better, he has risen, looks pretty good. Greg Hutton is the rider. He's been a regular on the Maryland circuit for the past 10 years. The 6 horse from the Lob Lolly stable of John Ed Anthony in Arkansas, Lost Mountain, a top 2-year-old, 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, 4th in the Remsen, has a 2nd and a 3rd in 2 allowance starts, his first stakes appearance in 1991. The rider, one of the most popular in the area here, 2nd in the standings, Patricia Cooksey. She's the 2nd all-time leading female rider behind Julie Crone. The 7 horse and the favorite now for the Jim Beam with Pat Day. This is Richmond. Won the Fairgrounds Louisiana Derby seen earlier on ESPN. Has 8 wins, including 7 stakes victories in 12 starts. He ended 1990 with 5 straight wins. And here's the man, Pat Day, won all 4 beams he's been in, 84, 87, 89, and 90. A multiple eclipse champion, Pat Day. The 8 horse, Subordinated Debt. 3rd in the Fountain of Youth to Fly So Free. He has always been in the money in 7 starts. 2nd in last year's Remsen. 3rd in the Champagne and Young America. Mike Smith, one of the top New York riders, is in for the mount. Was the 1986 riding champion right here at Turfway Park. A homecoming for Mike Smith. The 9 horse, this is the big colt from the Claiborne stable. This is Discover, a 7-length winner here in the John Battaglia, and his first start as a 3-year-old. Been training down in Aiken, South Carolina for Steve Penrod. This, by the way, the first starter in the Beam for the famed Claiborne Gold Silks. Aaron Grider is the rider, a top young Midwest rider. He's a regular on Discover. The 10 horse, this is Sir Otto. Now, he knows his way to the post. He is making his 23rd start. He ran 16 times at 2. His style running from off the pace, 2nd in the Ocala Breeders' Championship is last out. Jamie Bruin is the rider. He knows his way around this oval, too. Leading Turfway Park rider here and has won 3 titles at this track. Our final horse, the 11, this is Apollo. He is the speedster from the West Coast. 2nd to Dinar by a head in the San Rafael. His only defeat in 5 starts. A speed horse, as we mentioned. He has never been past a mile, though. The rider, one of the best, Hall of Famer Chris McCarron. He was 4th in the Jim Beam in 1987. There they are, the 11 who run today for $500,000 the Jim Beam, and to answer a lot of questions and to measure themselves, as we said earlier, against each other. The first big test of all the horses from around the country. We'll be back with the Jim Beam right after this. Turfway Park in Florence, Kentucky, moments away from the start of the Jim Beam Stakes. You know, a couple weeks ago when we were with you at Remington Park in Oklahoma City, we hit the Bud Long shot, returned better than $11. The fans have been yelling here for a Bud Long shot. Here he is for the Jim Beam.
We normally like to keep things on a cash basis. But for today's Budweiser long shot, we're taking on subordinated debt. Our money managers recommend extending credit for this selection based on a good payment record. In 7 lifetime starts, the son of Halo has earned a check every time out and has accumulated earnings of over $180,000. He ended his 2-year-old campaign with an appearance on the big board, finishing a close second to Scan in the Remsen. That's subordinated debt on the outside. And when the bell sounded this session, he looked even better, overcoming trouble to win an allowance event. And last out, he was 3rd in the Fountain of Youth behind Fly So Free. Now, even though Wall Street took a holiday this weekend, we expect subordinated debt to repay principal, interest, and a sizable return on investment as our Budweiser long shot.
And there is subordinated debt owned by Leslie Grimm, trained by Dave Montesey. Mike Smith has the ride, opened at 5-1, and the Bud Long Shot now at 6-1 here. Well, this is the 10th anniversary of the Jim Beam Stakes. We want to take a look back now, not too far back. In fact, just last year, 1990's Jim Beam producing its most famous winner ever. Coming off a recent training setback, Dogwood Stables' Summer Squall went to the post in last year's Jim Beam in what would be his most critical test leading to the Kentucky Derby.
At the top of the stretch, Summer Squall takes command on the outside, but Bright again battles back. Those two inside the 8th ball, and down the stretch they come. Summer Squall takes command, with Pat Day aboard, now pulling away by 2. Bright again is second, and the others are far back. Here's the finish of the Jim Beam. Summer Squall by 2.5.
That victory kept him on the road to the Triple Crown with a second at the Derby and a victory in the Preakness, giving the Jim Beam its first classic winner.
This look back has been brought to you by Claiborne Farm, where for more than a century, a great record reflects our experience.
That shot at Pat Day in the winner's circle. He's been there 4 times, we mentioned, the last 2 in a row, and there he is on the race favorite on Richmond, the 7-horse. We're 2 minutes to post for the Jim Beam.
Here at Sheehy Lincoln Merchant.
Towards the starting gate. Now let's go upstairs to Dave Johnson, his handicapping thoughts on the Jim Beam.
Well, subordinated debt hasn't raced since February, but he does well off a layoff. He's in a perfect position to win today with some value on the tote board. Oh, I love 6-1. He's well-bred, a son of Halo. He doesn't have to be on the lead. Good jockey. Mike Smith knows this track. He rode here regularly before moving his tack to New York. Subordinated debt as a 2-year-old was 3rd in the Champagne and the Young America at the Meadowlands. This year, he's been out twice. He won his 91 debut, even with trouble, and he seems ready to take a big step forward. So I bet him win in place, and I look for an exacta. Richmond I threw out. 8-5 is way too short for this one. I like Hansel, first-time Lasix, first-time Jerry Bailey, and I also like Apollo on the front end with Chris McCarron. So I boxed the 3, 8, 11, Apollo and subordinated debt, and Hansel, and I bet subordinated debt win in place. Chris?
Thank you, Dave. Dan, we've been keeping a close eye on the races. Any special track bias, except it's fast?
Yeah, the track is extremely fast, and we haven't had a horse go wire to wire yet. Horses coming from off the pace have been winning, and that's interesting because both Richmond and Apollo want to be on the lead.
And we should tell you, Pat Day has won 4 today. As you take a look at the track record, 149. I'd say it's in jeopardy. They zipped a mile and a 16th in 141-2, smashing the old track record by 3/5 of a second in the 8th race here this afternoon. As you take a look now at some of our Jim Beamers as they start towards the gate fence, he has risen. That's the hunch bet, I guess you'd say. I know Jerry Robb, his trainer, is hoping he has that kind of luck today. Here's Lost Mountain. Lost Mountain, of course, the Lob Lolly stable of John Ed Anthony. The rider, Patricia Cooksey, the young lady who was the winningest rider ever for females for about a few days, and then Julie Crone took over. And there's the favorite now at 8-5. Pat Day puts Richmond in the starting gate, the 7-horse, and getting ready for the call of the Jim Beam. Let's go upstairs now, Dave Johnson.
And getting ready for the Beam is the Bud Long Shot. That's subordinated debt. Here is Discover. Aaron Grider aboard for that impressive victory in the Battaglia. Now ready. He's confident. Talked to him earlier this afternoon. He likes his chances. This horse should be just off the lead. And there is a horse who does his best when coming from far back, Sir Otto. And the lightly raced Apollo, who was 3 for 3 as a 2-year-old, 1 win and 1 second this year, being beaten only by Denard. They're all in line, and they're off.
And Apollo, as expected, on the outside, quickly sprints to the front. Bobby M between horses. Here comes Richmond, and at the rail, it's River Fit. Passing the stands for the first time, Apollo on the outside. Now battles with River Fit, and River Fit takes command. Hansel is right there between horses, as is Bobby M. Apollo on the outside, 4 wide. Then Richmond is 5th at this point, moving up. He is risen along the inside, is 6th by a head. Subordinated Dead off the rail in 7th. Discover is 8th. Lost Mountain is 9th. About 15 lengths off the lead, and then it's another 7 lengths back to Wilder Than Ever and Serato at the back of the pack, first quarter in 22-4, and they're tightly packed on the front end. River Fit at the rail leads by a head, but Apollo comes at him, and Apollo puts a head in front as Richmond gets in gear with Pat Day on the outside. 3 of them across the track. Richmond on the outside to the front, and Apollo on the inside. Now those 2 race as a team past the half-mile pole. On the inside, it's Apollo. On the outside, it's Richmond, with River Fit racing 3rd by a head. Now Hansel, with Jerry Bailey, moves up on the outside into striking position 3rd. River Fit back to 4th. He has risen his 5th. Along the inside, here comes Discover 6th, followed by Lost Mountain. Midway on the turn, Richmond's ahead in front. Apollo battles back from the inside. Hansel on the outside is racing 3rd. As the field turns for home, 3 of them across the track. Anybody's horse race. On the outside, Hansel to the front. Now Richmond on the inside to challenge. Apollo drops out of it, and down the stretch they come. Hansel takes command, draws clear by a length and a half. Richmond is 2nd, and the others are far back. The 1991 Jim Beam goes to Hansel with Jerry Bailey, winning it by 2.5 lengths, in which Richmond finishing 2nd, 6 lengths farther back. The long shot Wilder Than Ever was 3rd, and the final time on the board, 1 minute 46 3/5 seconds. I believe that must be a malfunction in the tote board. 1:46 3. Could it possibly be that we've set a track record by that much? Chris?
Hard to imagine, Dave. The track record was 1:49, but that is what the tote board says here, 1:46 3. We'll try to get it official. They clicked a mile at 1:34 1. But to me, the story, Dan, has to be Hansel beaten 5 lengths by Fly So Free in the Florida Derby. Now what this does to me is move the Eastern horses up. Those followers of Apollo that said we've got the best in the West you haven't seen, they may have to take a second look. Apollo, well beaten today.
Well, I think that Apollo proved that he doesn't want any part of a mile and an 1/8. And we'll take another look at it. Apollo is on the rail, and he is already just about done as Richmond comes up on the outside of him, and then even farther out, Hansel. And the horses that have been on the lead have been stopping here all day. Hansel laid off of that fast early pace, and Jerry Bailey really with a hand ride down the stretch. Trainer Frank Brothers brought this colt here to try and catch up on the road to the Triple Crown. I think he's done it.
I think he's done it. And how about this? Jerry Bailey picked up the mount from Pat Day. Pat Day was already, of course, had to make the commitment to Richmond. Frankie Brothers made a late decision to come here, so asked Jerry Bailey to pick up the mount after Pat Day been on him for the last 5 races. So Jerry Bailey gets Hansel, breaks Pat Day's string of 4 Jim Beam races and 4 wins. Here's a tight shot of Hansel getting himself back in the Triple Crown picture. Time we understand is official, 1:46 3, absolutely shattering the mile and 1/8 track record of 1:49 here. Richmond was 2nd, and Wilder Than Ever, a real long shot at some, let's see, the 2 horse at 99-1 is 3rd. Again, that is unofficial. But Jerry Bailey, quite a victory for him. This Hansel, owned by Lazy Lane farmer Joe Albritton, a Houston businessman and banker who has Lazy Lane Farm located in Upperville, Virginia. The trainer, Frankie Brothers. The rider, of course, you met, Jerry Bailey. Let's go upstairs now to Dave Johnson to see how Hansel did it and ran himself back into the Kentucky Derby picture.
Well, let's watch the start and the finish. Now, keep your eye on the 11 horse for the start of the Jim Beam, and you'll see that Chris McCarron must hustle his 3-year-old to the front. And as expected, he did take the early lead. Now, just 2 off the rail, Jerry Bailey wearing the yellow cap, and Hansel is sort of between horses at this point, but running comfortably. No incident here, and Jerry just sneaks up there and gets a little forward position as they round the clubhouse turn, with River Fit, the long shot at the inside, Apollo on the outside, and the eventual winner, Hansel, is 3rd at the rail. And Hansel won this race much as he won the Arlington Futurity, breaking 3rd and then roaring through the stretch. He won it by a neck in Chicago. This afternoon, This time, 146-3 is not only shocking because of, well, it shattered the track record, but he did it so easily. And as you watch him come to the wire, he's not in a nose-to-nose deal. It is strictly a hand ride as Jerry Bailey is urging this 3-year-old under the wire in a phenomenal time of 146-3. Also phenomenal is the idea that Pat Day gave up this mount on Hansel. Now it looks like Jerry has another Triple Crown contender, as Hansel puts himself right back in the Triple Crown picture with this smashing victory. Chris?
Well, I know a lot of people don't like to put a lot on time, but we've got to talk about time today. You see former President Gerald Ford making the presentation to the owner, Mr. Albritton, along with the trainer Frankie Brothers. Earlier today at 6 furlongs in the 5th race, they ran in 108-3 to smash the record there. Then 141-2 for a mile and a 16th. And now this 146-3 for a mile and an 8th. Well, Dan Issel standing by with a man who from California has some questions, I'm sure, try to answer. Dan?
Chris, it looked like you went by River Fit pretty easily on the backside. Where did you run out of horse?
He started getting a little late under me just before we turned for home, Dan. Richmond ranged up along the outside of me down the backside, and he was going very comfortably with Pat. And the middle of the turn, we kind of looked at each other, tried to assess the situation, see who had the most horse. And just at that time, we both gave a little glance to the outside, and we saw Hansel flying. So both Pat and I moved about the same time, right around the middle of the turn, and Pat's horse went on and finished well, but mine got a little tired.
Did you have any idea that you were going that fast early on?
Well, this is a very rapid colt, and even though he was going well within himself, I knew the fractions were pretty lively, yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, and good luck down the road, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
Back to you, Chris.
Thank you. And again, they've measured themselves, and right now the East is better than the West as Hansel crosses the finish line. Back with more of our Jim Beam right after this. 109-3, the mile in 134-1, 146-3, the new track record for the Jim Beam, smashing the old mark by 149. The official prices: Hansel 11.20, 4.40-4. Richmond, the favorite, running second, 3.20-3. Wilder than ever, the 99-1 shot. Third, paying $14, 3.7 exacta, returns $35. Here's the full order now. Apollo finishes 4th as the second choice here today. Lost Mountain was 5th. Sir Otto was 6th. Some disappointments in the field. Well, we'll continue on and see. He has risen 7th. Riverfit 8th. Discover, a major disappointment after winning the Battaglia so impressively. Bobby M 10th, and the Bud Long Shot, forget about him. Subordinated Debt was 11th and last. Dan?
Jerry Bailey, it looked like when you got ready to make your move, you went by those 2 horses on the front pretty easily.
I did. He gave me a lot of response when I asked him. I'd never ridden him before, so I didn't know quite what to expect, but I was pleased when I called on him.
Of course, you're the regular rider of Scan on the West Coast, but it looks like you picked up another Derby hopeful here.
Well, this one's sure nice to have in the pocket, I'll tell you. Right here, he's moving to his horses fairly easy, and I was pretty sure that the front 2, Apollo and Richmond, I could beat. The only concern was about anybody coming from behind, but the way he finished, nobody was going to beat him today.
It looked like he had such an easy race. Were you surprised they were going that fast?
Well, the track's been quick all day. Lesser horses have been setting track records, so I knew the times would be pretty quick.
Okay, Jerry, thanks a lot and congratulations.
Thank you, Dan.
Back to you, Chris.
More decisions to make for the riders as well, as you mentioned. Hansel here, and of course he has Scan out on the West Coast. Dave Johnson, your thoughts?
Well, I'm with Ray Pollock. Let me get his thoughts and the thoughts of the thoroughbred of Racing Times.
Well, Dave, a lot of people gave up on this colt after the Fountain of Youth. It was determined he bled in that race. He came back, ran better in the Florida Derby, and today was just spectacular.
I have never seen a track record, and by almost 3 full seconds, set with such ease. For one other quick perspective on the Triple Crown, talk to Jerry Brown, who makes the figures for Thoroughgraph. He says that Scotty Schulhofer and Fly So Free, well, Fly So Free may not be the best 3-year-old in his barn. He says to watch out for a horse named Cahill Road, who hasn't even been in a stakes race, but looks like he's coming up race by race as the distance gets longer. Let's be sure that we keep our eye on Cahill Road, according to Jerry Brown. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you much, Dave. We're going to update you on some other racing news around the country. We understand Meadow Star won the Comley earlier in New York to remain undefeated. Here is the Cherry Hill Mile official results. Gala Spinaway, by the way, ridden by Chris's older brother, Greg McCarran. So one of the McCarrans is happy today in a stake. Near the limit second, Southern Sign was third in that prep race in New Jersey along the Triple Crown Road there. And the word is in the Comley in New York at Aqueduct. Meadow Star, a winner there. That filly remains perfect at 9 for 9 now for trainer Leroy Jolly. And she is being pointed now against the boys for the first time in the Wood Memorial, the last major New York prep race for the Kentucky Derby. So again, we continue to put this puzzle together here. And I want to remind you here on ESPN, something to look forward to later in the week here. It'll be on Tuesday, spring baseball from Plant City, Florida. The hometown favorites here, the world champion Cincinnati Reds, hosting the Boston Red Sox at 7:30 Eastern. And we'll have recap of all the major races this week, of course, as always, on the Budweiser Thoroughbred Digest this Thursday at 6 p.m. Dan, let's recap this day.
Well, I think the big question coming in was, could Richmond and Apollo get this distance? They couldn't. Hansel can.
And it's interesting, too. Again, remember, Hansel finished 5 lengths behind Fly So Free, 3rd in the Florida Derby. So now get your measuring sticks out, make some comparison. And now maybe, was that the big race of the year? Will that indicate, is Fly So Free really that much better than all the other 3-year-olds? Well, Hansel sure says that right now the East looks tougher than the West. We'll hear some more from the West, though, the San Diego Derby in a couple of weeks. The 1991 Jim Beam Stakes has been brought to you by Budweiser.